All right, hey, welcome everybody. This is episode. Sorry, let's just cut. Okay. Hey, greetings everybody. This is episode 2 of the FileMaker Fanatics podcast. We're back. So let's do a quick go rounds. A little bit briefer than last time. Scott, you want to start us off here?
Hello, everybody. This is Scott Rose of ScottWorld.com. How are you this evening?
And we got Aaron on the phone with us.
This is Aaron Schacht of Canyon Computer Services. I work with Scott and we collaborate on several FileMaker projects.
Yes, we love FileMaker.
Yes, we do. You might say we're fanatics about FileMaker. And my name is Tony White, and once again, my company name, creatively called Tony White Designs. And let's move right on. First, we have follow-up from the previous episode.
There was a slight misconception. We got a lot of calls and emails from people around the world.
Swamped.
That said, we were swamped because Aaron, in the last episode, our very first episode, said that he has been involved with the platform for 6 years, but that isn't what he meant. What he meant was he has been involved in the Mac platform for 6 years. Right, Aaron?
Right.
You've been in the PC platform for probably 25 years.
Yes, 25, 30, 35 years in the PC platform.
But FileMaker, you're a relatively new FileMaker developer, so you're our new voice on this podcast.
Yes, that's correct. I've been on the FileMaker platform for something like 2 years. So I'm going to bring that type of perspective to the show.
So the other update from our previous episode that I'd like to make is we talked a bit about, I mentioned that we were going to be introducing this FileMaker Code Objects as ERD infographic, and that has occurred, and we're not going to talk about it on this episode unless it comes up, but I would encourage people who want to have a look is just go to my website, which you can find a link from the FileMaker Fanatics podcast, or go there directly. It's twdesigns.com. And just look for the what's new, or look on the page that has the sitemap, and you'll see the FileMaker Code Objects as ERD infographic. It'll be worth the trip because it has updated for 14, which came out since our last podcast. We'll talk about that in a second. 14, yay!
Yay!
It has all of the code objects that make up a FileMaker solution, little stars for what version of FileMaker they were released in, and quite a few tips and tricks, so people should check that out. So
you did a great job with this ERD. It's really quite remarkable what you've done with this.
Thank you. And I got some nice feedback from some people. I got some private emails and some shout-outs on Twitter. One person said that it was, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said it was freaking awesome.
I love it. I love it.
I have to keep
That's a great quote.
Parental advisory rating here. Freaking awesome, he said. And then another person said, it's a very clean podcast. Another person said that he was going to set aside, a couple hours to study it. So that was nice to hear.
You know what I really love about this ERD? It really, for the first time ever, you can see just about every single thing that can go into a layout all in one chart.
Yeah, it's one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, if you print it out. And it's very colorful, very iconic, very visual. We had fun doing it internally, and it's sort of a little bit of a wax-on, wax-off exercise, if you've seen the movie The Karate Kid, or the revised movie, The Karate Kid, because it was a remake.
Only the original. I've only seen the original.
They're both good. I've seen them both, and they're both good. They're different in their own way. But yeah, it was a good exercise in that I think it helped us conceptualize how we approach programming, how we break up our code, what we put where.
Well, explain. What do you mean exactly? You're saying it's helping you in future databases, or it helped you take all your past knowledge and visualize it?
Every now and then you've got your nose to the grindstone, and you're just, you're writing code in the way that you know how to write code. And my feeling is every now and then it's a good idea as a developer, and I think we all do this, is, lift your head up, try and get a big picture and think like, okay, I'm spending a lot of time doing this. How should I be doing it?
It's interesting. Well, you know what I think is really interesting is that it almost helps you remember things that you might have forgotten at some point. Because you're like, oh, wait a second, I forgot about...
I think that's true. Yeah.
You say, oh, I forgot about web viewers and slide controls. Those are bad examples because you don't really forget about those things. But you know what I mean? You look at this and you're like, oh, wait a second, you can do conditional formatting on a merge variable? It's like, oh, I didn't realize that. But now I look at this ERD and you're like, you could definitely experiment with that when you're playing with the product. But then you look at this and you're like, oh my God, look at all these things that can take tooltips. Look at all these things that can take conditional formatting or whatever.
I think you also, you do that, exactly what you said, and you also kind of offload some of what, rather than keep it in your head, like your head is just filled with all these things that you have to remember. If you, write down something, or just, it's like a cheat sheet, in that you write down all this stuff, and then you can kind of like push that out of your head, and then you can think of creative things. You can concentrate on the project, like, what is the business, what does the organization need, not the technical, what are my little widgets.
Yeah. In a way, you look at this ERD and you almost wonder, why has it been 30 years and FileMaker's never put out something like this?
Well, I'm going to be politically correct and say they've been busy making a great product.
There you go. No, but it's so cool to have this visual like this. And that brings up another question. Like, I'm looking at one of these parts of this graph here, the theme part of the graph. And you can tell for a state, any given object, its state, there can be up to 8 different states. Depending on the object. I don't think any object has all 8.
Yeah,
but
true.
There's normal, hover, pressed, in focus, active, inactive, primary, alternate. Maybe the most one would have is 4 or 5 states or something?
I think I'd have to look at another infographic that we're working on internally. We're doing kind of a zoom in on the theme style area of the product, of the platform.
Interesting. Well, this is my question. I had a question for you. Do you think that FileMaker is almost getting a little challenging now to design layouts in the sense that every object has so many different states to account for that now we're doing extra work for each object that we put on a layout that we never had to do before?
No. Mm-mm. I like having a lot of different states, personally.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yes. In the olden days, I like to call them, of an object-oriented language, Visual FoxPro, there's probably double or triple the number of states that are in FileMaker. So,
really,
I actually like having different object states.
I'll try and split the difference here and say I think it's more work, and you get more. It didn't used to be able to do that, so you didn't have to worry about setting that programmatically. So there was less work in the past.
Right. I just noticed you're missing the placeholder state, which is the new one in 14.
Let's see. Hold on. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, we had a big debate over here. For about 3 or 4 hours, we discussed it. Well, maybe not 3 or 4 hours. We decided that we called it the infield label. We looked to see kind of what language FileMaker Incorporated was using and what others were calling it, and that seems to us to be an attribute of what we call a layout field, upper left-hand corner. It's actually,
but that's called placeholder text, though, in the system. No, in FileMaker.
I could be wrong about any of this, and we have a place on the website where people. If people find something that's wrong and gets past the committee,
yeah, it's called placeholder text.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, placeholder text. And it's actually in 2 places. See, do
they ever call it inline labels? Because sometimes FileMaker will call something 2 different things. Like for instance, script folders. they're called script folders, which I think is a great name. And they're also somewhere else they're called script grouping.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, here's something interesting. I totally see this in the upper left-hand corner, what you did here with the infield label. I haven't seen it called infield label anywhere in FileMaker, but I don't know 100% for sure on that one. But here's the thing, though. It's actually in two places. In placeholder text, it comes in two places. One is in the inspector on the data tab, where you actually type the placeholder text. So that's just where you put the text. But then, if you go to the position tab in the inspector, the appearance tab in the inspector, and you choose from the different states, active, inactive, hover, pressed, and focus, there's also one called placeholder text.
Okay, so this is very interesting. And one of the areas, and this isn't a segue, but I think it's an interesting, maybe it is a segue. One of the most interesting things and challenges for a FileMaker Pro developer, if you're fortunate enough to be working with clients who are on the 13 and 14, is figuring out a strategy for how to manage styles. And I would actually like to have a deeper dive into the whole theme style area. More and more and more from versions 12, 13, and 14, FileMaker has given us an increased ability to style different objects and I think what we call object components. So if you have, for instance, let's just stick with a layout field. The layout field, to our understanding, and we could be wrong, but I think when we looked at it, we look at the inline label or the other thing that you called it as being like kind of a sub-object that can be independently styled in the same way that you can independently style a popover control or you can style the button. They're all part of the same, thing, but they're actually like three different objects, or they're objects and sub-objects. And they have, if you look, as you were saying, Scott, if you look at the styling, if you go to the inspector to the style thing, you can see there's a little pop-up where you can select, either the pop-up, it's popover control itself, or the button, or the content, and style them individually.
Right. And how do you account for that on the ERD?
Here's where we drew the line. Here you talk about like the scope of a project and having to define, what you're trying to cover and what's not part of the project. For this particular diagram, we're not trying to kind of say everything there is to say about the FileMaker platform because that would be impossible. Yeah, right. We would. Yeah. So we just defined it as being objects, and how objects are styled. That's just outside of scope. Because I'd love to see. Prefer not to do it. I'd love to see a schematic. And if someone's going to do this, send us an email, or send me an email, or send us an email, send everybody an email. Post it on a public forum that you're going to do it, because what it would be, I think what would be awesome is if you identify all the objects using the same definitions that FileMaker uses, which you can see in the inspector, and just break down, what are the states that are applicable to those objects and what are the subcomponents of those objects. So there'd be maybe a little bit of a tree because you have an object and its sub-objects. Like I'd say a pop button is a sub-object of a popover control.
A pop, right, yep.
And a slide control panel is a sub-object of a slide control.
Mm-hmm.
So
what's interesting? You can even do a button bar where one of the buttons is a popover, and then within that popover you have another button bar with another popover.
What's a? Oh, the FileMaker 14 button bar.
FileMaker 14 button bar, right? Because you can make one of those buttons a popover, and then within that popover you can have another button bar. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. I guess that might be sort of an interesting segue into maybe we should mention. No, we already mentioned. Let's just put it fully on the table. Hey, so FileMaker 14 shipped, and it's got a whole bunch of new stuff, huh?
It's pretty cool. Oh wait, I just want to say one thing about that ERD. You did such a great job with that ERD. I mean, it's so impressive, your attention to detail in that, and how much I've learned just from reading it. It's really incredible.
Well, thank you very much. It was, it took us like at least an hour to do.
I just said something wrong. What's that, Aaron?
Probably a lot more than an hour.
Yeah, that was a programmer estimate. No, it took us. It was done over a period of months, actually. Not 7 days a week though, not 24 hours a day.
Oh, easily months.
But yeah, it's this is revision 8, and we're not even counting the subversion. So I'm always happy to hear when people are finding it useful. It's nice to hear. Thank you.
Although I just said something wrong a minute ago, which is that you cannot have, which we already know from previous versions since FileMaker 13, you cannot have a popover within a popover.
Can't you do it? It'll just create unexpected behavior, or you can't technically do it. Is that what's...
It's not letting me do it at all. Can we not do it at all? Let me try it again here. Let me see here. I'm trying it on my end.
Okay, this is live, by the way, everybody. This podcast is live.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Have we bored?
I mean, there is some editing. But, there is an expression here that's, I think, applicable is just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it. Some of these interface things, I think, could be taken a wee bit far. Too far.
Scott?
Yes.
Can you think of a reason you'd want to put a popover in a popover? Are there some practical applications for that?
Only because I thought it might be cool.
Okay. Can you think of any good reasons?
I just wanted to see if it could be done. I think this is more a FileMaker.
Well, that's how progress moves forward. It's somebody asked the question that nobody else had asked. Can it be done?
Right. Yeah, no, it cannot be done. It cannot be done. However, it's probably not a great design element anyways. It's probably something you wouldn't want to do anyways, I would imagine.
The one that you mentioned earlier, the idea of a button bar, which can so that is a new feature, and I think everybody's in the community is pretty much in agreement that a button bar is a good thing, and the ability to put one or more buttons into a button bar, and the fact that those buttons can be either buttons or they're close cousins, siblings, popover buttons, right?
Yeah. Hey, here's a cool thing I just discovered. I haven't heard any other FileMaker developer say this yet.
Breaking news.
I'm sure someone's figured it. This breaking news with FileMaker 14.
This is why people are listening to the podcast.
This is why people listen to the podcast.
Yeah. This is why they pay us the big bucks. I just found this out right this second, is that if you double-click on one of the button icons itself in a button bar, but instead of you just double-clicking and letting go, what you do is you double-click and keep your mouse held down during the second click. You can then drag the buttons around into a different order. Whatever button you're currently on, you could drag it to a different placement.
Cool.
Within the button bar.
And I'd say this only works if you have more than one button. I just thought I'd add, contribute to the body of knowledge that's being built up here.
Right. Yeah, there we go. It seems like sometimes you have to click off the button bar and come back on it again to make it happen. But that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So let's see. We, there's some. We're not going to cover everything in this podcast. We're not even going to try. There is on the New York FileMaker Pro website. What is that? The New York FileMaker Pro user group, which is nyfmp.org. There is I put together a link of a page of links of people who'd done a little bit of the deep dive kind of thing, and some of them are good and some of them are not as good. But I'd say the whole page is worth looking. I put in they're all good. You should read them all, and they're all awesome. And then so we actually, I think we've almost, you mentioned early on the inline labels, that's big. The some of the interface stuff, and then the whole script workplace is also like a gigantic improvement of productivity, right?
In many ways, yeah. There's a few bugs with it still, but overall, it's pretty good. It's a pretty dramatic improvement.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. There's some, FileMaker has a place where you can submit bugs, and I watched one bug today where the guy he had a video and he was working for really a long time to get the bug to occur. There are so many changes and so many improvements and it's so new that there are some bugs. They do seem to be manageable, although, I'm sure they're cranking away to do a VREV.
I hope so. Yeah, it seems
doubt.
like the bugs in this version are not show-stopping bugs like in previous versions. They're more like little interface issues, things
Right.
like that.
Right.
Overall, the improvements in this version, I think almost every improvement benefits the developer. I mean, this is definitely a developer's release for sure.
Well, yeah, with the script workplace, which I think is, to each his, everybody's got their own favorite thing. I think the script workplace is certainly one of the highlight features for people.
Tony?
Yes,
Tony,
sir?
I would never correct you. I would never correct you in public, but it's actually the script workspace.
I appreciate it. I think it just makes me a better person to have
But I
that.
think we should actually change it into workplace because I actually like how that sounds better.
Coders
So,
in
Scott?
space.
Go on. Yes, buddy?
Are you taking advantage of some of these new features? Have you seen practical productivity improvements, would you say, with
I
Script
would
Workspace?
say there's probably some productivity slowdowns right now because it's so new and there's still some bugs and I'm still learning all the new stuff. But I'm definitely excited to implement these things in the future. Like one bug that's been driving me crazy is I write really long comments in my scripts because I love commenting stuff for myself. And in the new Script Workplace, I'm going to start calling it Workplace from now on. In the new Script Workplace, comments, if you type too long, or if you're opening up an old solution where you had long comments, you can't read the whole comment anymore. It used to be where you could double click on the comment and it opens up in its own window and you can read the whole comment. Now the comment will just get cut off and there's absolutely no way to see the rest of the comment, which is really, really hard, especially if you're writing like one paragraph worth of comments at a time, like I do. So I open up an old solution and all my comments get cut off on the right margin. And you can't actually see what you've written. So I'm actually copying and pasting my comments out of FileMaker and into TextEdit just to read what my comments are. Really, so that's sort of one of the many bugs I've stumbled upon in the new FileMaker 14.
Yeah,
I mean,
I saw that one.
obviously
I think that's one of the things that is affecting people. Now, can you like take a comment that's long and like dupe and make it multiple lines?
Yeah, that would actually be another workaround. Yeah, take a comment that's really long, chop it up into pieces, and then make it like 3 comments in a row. You can also, someone told me, I actually haven't tried this yet, you can apparently hit Option Return, which will give you line breaks within your comment, and then if you double click on the comment, if you double click on the comment, it actually will open up and expand and show you the whole comment, but it requires option return to do it.
Okay.
So there are some weird workarounds. But, when you're opening up like a gigantic solution that's got thousands of scripts in it and you've commented it heavily, like you don't want to go through 200 scripts and start updating all your comments by hand.
Yeah. Well, it'd be
So
interesting.
before you could not have spaces in scripts, right? You couldn't have line breaks, essentially.
True, and that's one of the new features. Now you can have line breaks, yeah.
Is that something you guys are enjoying?
Line
Do you
breaks
like line
in
breaks for
script
readability?
Script names, or I see what you're saying. Right.
Blank lines in scripts.
They had to be comments.
Right. In the past, they had to be comments. Now you can just have plain blank lines.
Do you like that, you guys, or no?
I think that's probably going to be really helpful. What do you think, Tony?
Or is it irrelevant?
It never really bothered me that you had white space created with comments versus white space created with blank lines. It's
Because it's almost the same thing, huh?
it's
I
not what's.
suppose.
Yeah, I'm kind of. It's okay with me. But what did I like the most? WebDirect is the other thing that is kind of a showcase feature. Is so FileMaker? This is interesting. FileMaker claims 25% speed, but the community is reporting greater speeds. So it's kind of interesting. FileMaker is perhaps being conservative in terms of the speed reports. So they did a lot. It's one of the signature releases or features of the release. Is WebDirect is much better. They put a lot of time and effort into that. Now, I actually, I got a email from a client that I'd done some work with, just like a year and a half ago, and he was describing a scenario that was, like a really nice WebDirect scenario. But a lot of this, to be honest, 14, it's still, even as we talk on this podcast, it's still pretty new. I mean, it's been out a month, less than a month, I think.
Oh yeah, just a couple weeks actually.
So what we're at over here is we're in the process of thinking out our strategy, just how we're going to code. Like here's a good one. So we have clients, right? And it's just the inevitable. It's the reality of the world is that we're going to have clients, some of whom are in 12, some of whom are in 13, and some of whom are in 14. We actually even have some clients on 11. And so the 12, 13, 14, they're all in the same family, the same file format. So here's an interesting thought. We really like 14, and we're like, oh, man, we want to use this as a development environment. So we have to think and check a couple things about what are the rules that a developer needs to know if they want to develop in 14 because of the script workplace and the productivity. Once you, as Scott, you were saying, get up to speed, once you get familiar with the script workplace and all the type ahead and the shortcuts and the autocompletes and whatnot, it will be more productive. Not the first time you sit down, but after you learn the keyboard shortcuts and whatnot. So, but the rules are like, okay, so what do we know? It's like, okay, if we have a client who's on 12 for whatever reason, maybe their hardware doesn't support, then how do you make sure? Like, you don't use buttons unless they're on 14. Don't use the new button. And how do you kind of like make sure that you're not using a feature that they won't have access to until they get a chance to upgrade their operating system to, you have 10.9 or 10.10 to run 14. But we long story short, we want to use 14 for development, and that's what we want. But we also have to be really, really careful about like if the client's on 12 or 13, maybe we'll develop in 12 if we're doing for 12, because then we don't have to think too hard about. If I'm using 12 to develop in 12, I'm not going to add a 14 feature because I'm not using 14. But if I'm using client with 13, I might use FileMaker 13 to develop. So that's an easy way to keep track, right? Well, I don't know. What do you all think about that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's always the tricky thing, right? You're developing in a version, you want to use all these features, and then if your clients are in a previous version and they haven't upgraded yet, there can be some real issues. The thing with me is I try to get them on the newest version, whatever I'm developing in. With FileMaker's new annual licensing fees, they're making it so cheap and affordable now for people to just stay up to date with the newest version. Not that I would have people jump into 14 immediately, but it's easy nowadays to keep people up to the latest version of FileMaker, even if it's just FileMaker 13 at the moment. I think that we should take the clients along with us for the ride to the new version.
What I do, I mean, sometimes, like I said, I have clients who span the gamut, at different versions for different reasons, having to do with their budgets. Some have, budgets, and some have, their hardware, and there's just like a variety of different things. So what I try and do is when a new feature comes out, when a new version comes out, I take note of all the features. I load them up into my FileMaker correspondence generation system, so that I have an email, and I keep in mind what the possibilities are, and I will inform the clients both, when the product comes out, and also as they go forward that, hey, if you are on this version, you would have pop-ups available, for instance. Or, just so, in other words, it's a kind of a carrot approach.
Like in a way to tell them, hey, we could do this if you upgraded, that sort of thing?
Well, here's one of the things I come back to is FileMaker 14 runs only on 10.9 and 10.10.
Yeah.
And, maybe, and I definitely have a client where they have Macs, and Macintosh computers last a long time. And unless they've got, unless they have a program to do the upgrades. Now, 10.10 is free. That helps. You can install 10.10. The backward compatibility on computers is pretty good. You can go pretty far back.
And it does run on old computers. Like 10.10 can install all the way back on an iMac from 2007.
Yeah, like if you look at, so Apple's done a really good job of making it, the more recent versions run on, they're not hardware hungry. You still have to overcome a little bit of inertia that clients are going to have when they have the software that they have. And, they just went through the trauma, some of them, of going from XP to Windows 7. But now Windows is coming out with 10, so it's like, whoa, this is like, some days you want to say, slow down, slow down.
Well, you bring up a good point that Apple, I don't know about Microsoft, but Apple has been very aggressive with their OS releases. Like stuff like, if you create a Pages document in a newer version of Pages, slightly newer version of a point release, newer version on like the iPad or someone else's Mac, you can't even open it in a slightly older version of Pages. Like, you have to completely, and the problem is the new version of Pages requires the new operating system. So, like, you can't even get a point release upgrade to Pages unless you upgrade your entire computer to Yosemite. Like, even Microsoft would never do that. Like, Microsoft Word on any operating system can open every Microsoft Word document going back 30 years. And Apple, like, they are pushing, requiring people. You can't even open up your documents unless you go to the newest operating system.
Scott?
And FileMaker's sort of doing that too. Yeah.
Scott, this did not happen, and I mean this, under Steve Jobs. This did not happen.
Didn't they discontinue Final Cut Pro and the 17-inch laptop and everything when he was alive?
Oh, okay. Well, we can ignore that stuff. But Scott, this is a real issue. I see this type of thing happen every day. Frustrations with Pages and version differences and upgrading, and suddenly iPhoto doesn't work, and then you have a hard time getting the version of iPhoto you need.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Although I do think that Steve Jobs is. Steve Jobs was very famous for axing things. Like iWeb was axed, and it's probably a good choice on their part. iDVD was axed after people got really used to that. A lot of hardware, of course, was axed. But yeah, no, you're right. It is an issue. And FileMaker is sort of following in those footsteps because, FileMaker's already said that 10.9 is going to be deprecated. Or it is deprecated right now.
Well, I'm using 10.9 though.
No, meaning deprecated, meaning it still works, but it could, but the compatibility could be removed at any given time in the future.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like next version, probably.
Okay. Yeah, the next version. What does deprecated mean? Like, there's an official definition for deprecated.
It means that it might not be around in the next version. It doesn't guarantee that it's going in the next version. And one of the other things that was on the FileMaker community website, the word deprecated was mentioned in connection with the runtime, and it was really, really, really interesting because there are a lot of people. We've used runtime in the past. We're not currently. I had a client using runtime to distribute FileMaker files around the world and gather data and bring it back and stuff like that. We've migrated to the web, but there are a number of developers who have been using runtime to distribute vertical market apps, and they were like, "Whoa, that's my livelihood there." And then FileMaker asked them, after there was quite a long thread, FileMaker asked those developers to explain, or not, to give feedback on what they were doing. And I thought to myself, if I was doing a vertical market app, I thought, hey, maybe I want to use the runtime. I think you have to make the business case that you're using the runtime, you're selling 100 copies, 10% of your user base is upgrading to 10-seat server license. So, it's providing an economic benefit.
Sure.
I don't have a dog in the race per se, but so that's the runtime is quote unquote deprecated, but FileMaker might a bunch of people might present numbers to FileMaker and they might be like, oh, well, actually this is helping the platform in ways that we didn't see, but now that we've gotten the feedback, so it doesn't mean it's gone for certain, but.
Do you think it's interesting they deprecated the runtime?
I'm not privy to the code base. I like the idea of the platform, growing. I mean, I haven't seen the numbers, so I can't opine on the business case from a FileMaker point of view. I know that if I was a person with a runtime solution, I would do my best to provide an analysis of I sold, and like I said a moment ago, I sold 100 copies of my solution last year, and I can give you these names of these 10 clients who went ahead and went from kind of what to FileMaker is the freemium model, the free, and then they upgraded to the one that puts money into the pockets of FileMaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, would be what would be the most compelling argument, because the other arguments would be more intangible. It's like, well, it's advertising or something like that. But I'm not really in a position to know from either side of that relationship.
Yeah, interesting.
Can I ask you guys a philosophical question about FileMaker?
I love talking philosophy more than tech.
But it does relate to FileMaker and the direction they're going in. So, Scott, you mentioned earlier that this is the first release where they really focused on developers. Why do you see a change like that? Why do you see this release, 14, is more geared towards developers, enhancements for developers versus the end user? Is there a change in management? Where do you see this coming from?
There's always this, they've always sort of said, there's sort of been this urban legend, I don't know if it's true or not, actually. It may be actually true, where the FileMaker developers have always said that FileMaker, every other version is a developer release, and then every other version is a user release. So version 14, 12, 10, and 8 were developer releases, then 13, 11, 9, 7 were user releases. But that's actually not true because 7 was a major developer release.
I think they work off the Fibonacci series.
No, actually, I would love to see them focus more and more and more and more on developers. I think this is just a theory that I have. I have no inside information on this at all. But recently, FileMaker switched to this new annual licensing program that they've always had the maintenance program in the past, but now they've switched to this new annual licensing thing.
Fantastic.
Where they've dramatically lowered the price, where any business now can pretty much sign up, pay annually for FileMaker at a very low price, and get all the new versions that come out, because FileMaker made the pricing so that it would take you 3 years of paying annually to catch up to what used to be sort of the maintenance plan, the volume licensing. They've got all these different names for it. I forget. But the point is that let's say it costs your business $500 a year to be on their annual licensing program. You'll get every upgrade over the next, as long as you keep paying, you'll get every upgrade. But if you decide just to buy FileMaker, right? You're not renting it on an annual basis, but you're buying it, and you buy this one version, it's going to be, let's say, $1,500. They've actually calculated it so that it's always 3 times. Buying FileMaker software what they call a perpetual license, is always 3 times the cost of what it would cost you to rent the software, which is what they call an annual license. So almost anyone is going to say, oh, well, of course I'm just going to pay annually, because within those 3 years, FileMaker is going to release at least one major upgrade in those 3 years. They release a major upgrade approximately every 18 months. And so my thinking, so this is all building up to my big theory here. My big theory is, if FileMaker can guarantee, now that they know they've got all these people switching over to this annual licensing plan, the renting plan, and they know that they have X number of dollars coming in every year no matter what, because people are just renewing. Technically, in theory, that could potentially be freeing up FileMaker to finally focus truly and solely on the developer, as opposed to trying to come up with these silly, flashy features to try to entice the marketing department of some corporation to upgrade to the next version. Because this release, if you look at all the features, it's almost 100% focused on the developer. Because a user can install the new version, and they're not going to really see any difference except the new monochrome toolbar at the top. But developers are going to see all the difference, and we have so many tools. And I think that it would be incredible if FileMaker kept focusing on the developer like this, and maybe it's because they are certain that they're now getting this annual, ongoing rental income, and people are just going to keep renewing no matter what.
And Scott, this benefits the end user when you focus on developers, correct? I mean, these features are filtering down and improving their experience.
I agree. I think FileMaker's always had a hard time of straddling that line of, their left foot is saying, oh, well, we want a program that's really, really easy for grandma to use so she can create a recipe book with all her recipes. And then the right foot is on the other side of the line, which is, well, we want to make a really powerful tool for developers. And FileMaker, I feel, has long had this as an internal battle, an internal conflict. Like, who in the world are we making this product for? They still may be having this conflict. Are they making it for people that don't know how to program, and they're making it for my mom and dad? Or are they making it for developers to benefit the users through the trickle down, like what you were just talking about, where not trickle down, but where we will create powerful solutions that are easy for our end users to use. So it feels like that FileMaker has always had this struggle with themselves. And Aaron, to your point, I would love if they focused only on the developer. Because we can make incredible solutions for people that they can't make on their own.
I think it's I jump in and say that it's a balancing act, I think, between, and I'm pretty much agreeing to say that I think that FileMaker, as a wholly owned subsidiary of Apple, has had a balancing act that they need to do, where they do have kind of two markets that I'm sure there's like a spectrum, but it's essentially the people who actually really can go out, buy FileMaker, and without being, C programmers, can build something that's useful to them, and or start with the starting point templates, or and then they also have another market, which is us, essentially, developers who are kind of fundamentally different and going to care about different things. And then they also have to balance the developer tools and the effort that they put into creating developer tools with the things that they built into that people see. The pop-up buttons, or the slide controls, or which are kind of flashy, and even the button bar things and all of the user interface things that are kind of innate to FileMaker as a very specialized tool, as a rapid application development tool, because they have to kind of like do all these things. They have to make the user interface stuff, they have to build into the logic layer, and then they have to build into the persistence layer. They have to build all those three pieces. Plus, they have to build the kind of the development environment. So they have a lot to balance, and I don't know if they like have a dartboard, you know,
Yeah.
that they use for each version, or I think more likely they have a list of things they'd like to do, and then for each version, because they have to ship individual versions, then they have to make choices. What are we going to pick? And as they move forward, they probably they might add some things, but more likely each version moves forward, they probably throw one or two things over the board as they try and hit some sort of ship deadline.
Yeah, I'm going to go back on what I said a second ago. Because as you were saying that, Tony, you made me realize something really important, which is that I would say a good 30% of my clients, maybe more, maybe somewhere between a third and one half, maybe between 30 and 50% of my clients, when they call me to hire me for the first time, they have already dived into FileMaker Pro themselves. This is the non-programmer. This is the layperson who doesn't know programming code.
Yep.
And they've created a little tiny basic FileMaker solution for themselves. And it's worked well for a couple of years, whatever, really, really basic. And now they're at the point where they need someone professional to step in, fix it up, and get it to that next level. And so, you bring up a really good point, which is that if FileMaker didn't target those people, now I'm realizing that maybe I would never even hear from 1/3 to 1/2 of these people who are calling me for development work. So actually, maybe that's actually not such a bad thing that FileMaker does spend half of its time focusing on these new non-programming users.
Yeah, I think that it's good for the community. I mean, it's the nature of the product that you really can get started, and you don't have to make a massive investment necessarily. You can, just start with the starter templates, or start with a vertical market app, and grow from there. And it is actually good. It's good for the developer community. It's good for the marketplace, so to speak. That is kind of the nature of things. I wanted to kind of just go back one topic here to talk about the licensing. So it's certainly true that this annual licensing is getting a lot more attention from FileMaker Incorporated, and that makes sense. They every company wants to have a recurring revenue stream and wants to kind of have stability. It's kind of like a food co-op or a CSA, where you make a deal with the farmer where, a certain number of people are going to guarantee to buy produce. It's kind of an insurance policy going forward. The annual license is sort of almost a partnership between the customers and FileMaker. I do want to add a thought, which is they do have the perpetual license as well, which I think is good because in my collection of my client base is divided. For some of them, purchasing on an annual basis makes the most sense for them economically. It matches their cash flow, it matches their commitment to the platform, which, generally is going to grow over time. The annual licenses for some is the perfect fit. And then for other clients, the perpetual license is absolutely what they want.
Interesting.
Almost what they demand. Because there's clients that I've spoken to who nobody really owns the software other than FileMaker, but there's clients who are even legally required or, required by policy to have a perpetual license that'll never expire. So that, I'll give you, for instance, just from the customer point of view, and this isn't news, I'm sure, to anybody, it's that customer says, okay, we want to buy our licenses, and then we want to own them because, we're going to pay you or someone, a consultant, X amount of money to build something, and they don't ever want, for the next X number of years, they don't want to ever have, the software turn off.
Right.
Because maybe they're going to invest $10,000, $50,000 to build a serious system, and so they want to kind of, it's kind of like, if someone is going to build a factory, maybe they want to own the building.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the bottom line, what FileMaker is doing is smart in that they are offering choices. So there's more than one way.
Yep. Yep. Unlike Adobe, who's forcing almost everybody into the rental model. I'm someone who uses Photoshop or used Photoshop like once a year, or twice a year, and I'm not going to pay an ongoing, $30, $50, $60 a month just to launch Photoshop twice in a year. So of course I switched over to Pixelmator, which is a one-time cost, does pretty much everything that Photoshop does.
Yeah.
And, I think Adobe, that was such a bad money grab on their part. And yet some people tell me that it makes sense because they always get the newest updates from Adobe. But in a way, though, the opposite of that is also true, which is that Adobe's probably, just like Microsoft and everyone else, is struggling to come up with ideas to put into a 30-year-old product at this point. Like, not FileMaker. FileMaker seems to be doing pretty well, but like how much more can you put into Microsoft Word, into a word processor at this point? So Microsoft's got to charge with 365. Because there's no way you can change a word processor anymore.
I'm guessing, that's the people who are making software. That definitely has got to be the issue that they address. Is they want to figure out how to set up a sustainable model. And I think on the, if you talk to people who do vertical market solutions, this is what I've heard. We don't currently have a vertical market solution, but what I've heard is that if somebody sells a vertical market solution for X, that they usually want to sell it with a service contract of, I think 18% is the number that I've heard, which is sort of typical. And what it is like, let's say that you sell a vertical market solution for video rental stores, which is a horrible example because that market is probably not very active right now.
We have a great one in Austin. It's like one of the last ones left in the country. It's called, I think it's called Vulcan Video. It's fantastic.
Or maybe one for bricks and mortars bookstores. So in order to do that,
we have another one of those in Austin. Book People. Man, Austin's a great place for these things.
Well, maybe I should get that runtime and crank out something. So I heard
Scott.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you take me? Was that the place you took me? Was Vulcan?
Vulcan Video. Yeah,
I loved that place.
It's like one of the best video stores left in the country. It's probably one of the only ones left because the people are still passionate about movies. And you walk in, it's like you're walking into the 1980s, but instead of VHS tapes, it's all DVDs. But they do have old VHS tapes there too. But it's just, wasn't it amazing, Aaron, how much that guy behind the counter knew about every video ever created?
No, it was really incredible to see that those places, they don't exist anymore except in very few places like where you are. But
yeah, it's a cool city. Austin's a cool city.
It is a really cool place.
I guess from a self-interested point of view, from what I'm hearing from my New York City customers, having the choices is good, and it makes me a little nervous that if a choice were ever to go away, the perpetual license, I'd hate to lose a client because they don't want to buy into and I think it's different, because if you make a commitment, like Photoshop, you're going to edit an image and you're done, and then the next month you're going to edit a different image and you can use a different software. But FileMaker, you're asking a company to make a commitment to a project, which might be, I'll just say, 10 to 50 grand, like I said before. And let's say it's 50 grand. They would want a promise. They don't, and I've had clients tell me this where they just want to have some stability in that ownership. So I think, like I said before, FileMaker is smart to continue to offer choices. I personally hope that they will continue to offer options. I think they're going to definitely fiddle with the pricing model. They might make the annual cheaper and the perpetual more, but
You think they're going to go in that direction?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. To be honest with you, ultimately it's the client's money, and I have a limited amount of influence in terms of how to spend their money. The best thing that I can do, and I think the thing that I'm obligated to do as a consultant, is to, one, smooth the path, say hey, here's where you are, here's where the platform is, here's the benefits that you get if you move forward. Here's the things that you need to do to move forward. For instance, you will need to upgrade these computers. This is what you have to do. That's the roadmap. And I can show them the roadmap, and I think that helps, just to kind of educate them about what's available and how to get from point A to point B, and then to tell them what their pricing options are. And then, and the fourth obligation, which is probably my most important thing, is to make sure that they have a terrific experience wherever they are. Whatever version of FileMaker they're at, because usually at some point, whatever software they have, there's almost on any given day, there's something that I can do and build or code for them that'll make their experience of the FileMaker platform better. And, my philosophy is the better the experience that someone has with FileMaker where they're at on any given day, the more likely they're going to become long-term committed to the platform, which is good for me and good for FileMaker and good for the world in general.
Aaron, how do you feel about all this, about the developer release, about FileMaker's focus, about the upgrade pricing, about the annual licensing? I mean, not upgrade pricing, annual licensing. How do you feel about all these topics?
Well, I'm a big fan. I didn't used to be, but I'm now a big fan of annual licensing. I think it helps the developer and it helps the customer. So it keeps everyone on the latest software. And a lot of the customers I deal with, they always talk about wanting all of their employees to be on the same version of things. So it helps keep them current. I think it's more economical. But even if it isn't, even if it costs a little bit more, because some people might, I'm sure you've seen people stay on an old version of FileMaker for many, many years.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah.
Well, it is terrible. And then you and I worked on a project where a customer had a very, very old version of FileMaker, and you had to go back and you had to kind of clean up code. It was very difficult because it was an old version of FileMaker.
How far back?
I think we're talking about FileMaker 8.
Ouch.
Yeah, there were even printing problems with FileMaker 8, like on the Mac platform. Like, once 10.7 Lion came out or something. I'm not 100% sure which OS, but one of the OSs broke the printing in FileMaker 8, and so you needed to upgrade to FileMaker 8.5 or later. And this client was so incredibly cheap that he did not, his entire business ran on FileMaker. He had 10 employees, 10 copies of FileMaker 8, and I mean, it's now many, 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 many years beyond FileMaker 8. And it wasn't printing anymore, right? Because he started getting some new computers in the office that were running the latest operating system. And he was like, well, that's okay. Those computers don't need to print. We'll just print from the older machines.
He might have been being like penny-wise, pound foolish there.
Absolutely.
Probably.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, they were already on FileMaker 12 or something at that time when we were talking with them about this. And, yeah, it makes it very, very difficult, particularly when FileMaker, I'm not necessarily considering that a bug. That was probably an OS thing that broke in the old version. But a lot of times, you guys have seen this many times in the past, FileMaker doesn't really love to fix all their bugs for free. They will save up bug fixes for the next major upgrade.
I don't know if they've got like a conscious plan there. I think that they're basically... the software developer is inevitably, the software company is inevitably, the business model is almost necessitates that they push things forward and maintain it seems like the obligation seems to be to maintain 2 or 3 versions at any given point, and then to drop previous versions and focus their resources, the amount of energy and programming time and, their resources on the current version and 1 or 2 versions back. And then beyond that, they, like version 8, I'm pretty sympathetic, but version 8 is not a version that I would endorse at this point in time. I mean, I'm all for, like, I have clients who have computers, but 8, no.
There were even, I think that was the first version that came out was PDF saved to PDF. Maybe that was 8.5, 8, somewhere around there. But there were even some bugs that I stumbled upon with PDF creation in version 8 that were ultimately fixed in 8.5 and 9. And so the thing is, you really, whether it's conscious or not for them to fix bugs in the next major release, I think that it's important to get those bug fixes and keep our clients moving forward.
Here's a thought. When FileMaker 13, and this might be useful to people, I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous episode, that when FileMaker 13 came out, I looked at the technical requirements, the operating system requirements, and I wanted to do, for each version that comes out, I like to do kind of like one thing that I put out to the community that's somewhat polished, rather than the kind of the scruffy notes that we have internally. And one of the things that we put out was a roadmap. So when 13 came out, it required a certain operating system to run. And the way I look at it, like if I had a client who said, oh, we have FileMaker 8, you might look at like what they're supposed to do, and it might, I'm not saying what would, maybe they should get like all new across the board. Or maybe they should, and you can still do this. I think you can still buy 14 and get a down license to 11, like you buy 14, and you can get the licenses to install 11, and then you can upgrade your hardware. You can kind of like, sometimes you can move forward step by step, upgrade FileMaker, upgrade your OS, or upgrade your OS and then upgrade FileMaker. Like, take one step at a time. We did a giant upgrade a number of years ago with a client, and this was like really a number of years ago, because they were running FileMaker 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, somewhere way back in time, right? And they had to do two things. They had to upgrade FileMaker, and this is what they wanted to do. They were like, we want to get to the next operating system, which happened to be OS 10. They were going from OS 9 to OS 10. We want to get to OS 10, and we wanted to get to the next version of FileMaker. So they're very savvy, and we talked about it. And there's a rule in IT guidance that don't change too many things at once. Because if you change like 12 things at once and something goes wrong, you don't know which of the 12 things it was, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that always made sense to me. So we had a little, a friendly New York discussion about how to approach it. There was a decision to upgrade we looked at the technical aspect of it, the technical roadmap, lay of the land, and the decision was made to upgrade from, as I recall, upgrade the operating system to OS 10 and wait 2 weeks to see if anything broke. And then to do the second part. So towards that, and you can find a link. It's on the FileMaker. There's a link actually from my site to this diagram, although you could work it out on your own. It's just a way of like, if I put one foot onto here, you kind of leg your way up. Because sometimes you can upgrade your operating system and your FileMaker still works, and then you can upgrade to the next FileMaker. So the point of my story is that sometimes it's a two-step process. It's not always going to be a hole-in-one. Sometimes it's like step 1, evaluate, take a week, take 2, and then step 2. And sometimes that's the best way to get from where you are to the more modern FileMaker environment with all the new features without having things, kind of possibly go wrong with glitches. Because, there's usually, with technology, there's usually at least 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 small things that go wrong. Right? There's going to be, you're going to have a particular printer.
Just one thing.
You're going to have your scanner's going to stop working.
Yep. Well, but see, what you talked about makes a lot of sense, and that can usually be done in the vast majority of cases. However, sometimes you get situations like, this is going to blow your mind, but I have one client that's still running Mac OS 9 and FileMaker 6 because they cannot afford to redo their system from scratch, and we actually have to redo their system from scratch. So they can't even dive into OS 10 because of the fact that they're locked in this old system. The problem is we built their system with them, starting like in FileMaker 3 and FileMaker 4, and FileMaker did not have a lot of power back then, And so we heavily used all sorts of plugins in their solution to make FileMaker do things that, of course, are now built into FileMaker. Almost every single thing, almost 95% of the plugins we use with them are now built into FileMaker, except for one, which is capturing pictures from a live webcam, which we would use Troy Grabber for. And anyways, long story short, they're dependent on all these plugins which have been discontinued. So if they were to upgrade to OS 10 and FileMaker 7, and we converted their system would actually break because the plugins would no longer run under FileMaker 7. So they're in a real bind now. They have to rebuild, but they don't have the money to do it. So, and yet their system will not work without those legacy plugins. So that's a situation where they can't even dip their toes in the water. But what you were saying a second ago, outside of extreme cases like that, you're right. Most of the time you can dip your foot in one variable, change one variable at a time.
Yeah. I was going to say, send your donations to Upgrade Project and FileMaker. No, just kidding.
Well, that reminds me, we should put a Bitcoin donation.
We would have to explain what Bitcoin is to some of our audience. So with FileMaker 6 actually runs on 10.6.8 with small issues. FileMaker 6 can run on 10.6.8. We keep a 10.6.8 machine in the house so we can run the metadata magic tool. But so that's one possible roadmap. Although it does sound to me that might be a rebuild. That might be get a new OS, get a new FileMaker, rebuild, and then do a one-time data where you move the data from 6 to... That might actually be like a 2-hop up import, where you have to go from...
Oops, sorry about that.
Oh, did you drop off for a sec?
Yeah.
Oh, you missed it. We were talking about
you. You guys didn't even know I was gone. That's so terrible for me.
No, we missed you. We were emotionally distraught.
I was thinking we could put a Bitcoin QR code on our website to accept donations.
And I think that's when, mysteriously, you got disconnected right at that point. Let's not go
and
there.
What did you say? And what did you say after that?
No, right after you said that, I said, we'd have to explain what Bitcoin is. And then we said, in your case, it does sound like if they had the money to do that, then when they have the money to do an upgrade, it seems like maybe that would be just start from take the files, upgrade it, get all the kinks out on a clean system, and then port the data. Yep. More of a
rebuild.
Yeah, some flavor of rebuild. Maybe starting from this, but rather than a migrate.
Yeah, it would be difficult, and it was like the old interfaces and stuff. Like we're better programmers now than we were in FileMaker 3.
Yeah, I think you can make a case that's pull out your starter file, and start from there, and then set up some sort of data mapping scripted imports.
Yeah.
Well, I hope they get a budget because
I do too. They're working on it right now.
At some point, they're going to have no choice because it's going to get harder and harder for them to get hardware.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They'll be like scraping eBay. So actually, some closing notes. I suppose we can go to closing notes. Let's pull out the link here. Oh, here we go. Shout-outs. The FileMaker Fanatics site is up, and it was built. Let me bring it up so I can remember what it looks like. The logo. Shout out to Karen Stella of Grapheteria, who did the Bezier curves upon which our logo was built. She also did the logo for the New York FileMaker user group, which you can see
Karen.
at nyfmp.org.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
I don't know. I wrote some of the HTML. The CSS, which is harder, was done by my business partner, Eliza, who exists. And the words, a lot of back and forth on the words. So we have a very simple, to-the-point website for the FileMaker Fanatics website. We do. We do not yet have an RSS feed, mostly because we were working on the logo and the words for the website and the look of the website. But we will at some point. And we're also going to have a email address, which should be up by the time you hear this podcast. It will be fan, F-A-N, at filemaker-fanatics.com, and it'll go out to the people, to the team. And there's other things that we haven't done. There's lots of things we haven't done. We don't have a transcript. We don't have a T-shirt yet. But we're working on a bunch of things. But I feel really good about the logo. Looks great. The website, I think, looks really nice. Mm-hmm. And we have 2 episodes to our podcast, and more planned.
I love it. I
Excellent.
love it.
And
Tony, thank you,
Tony,
for organizing it. Tony, this is your brainchild.
well, I'm kind of the logistical guy. I mean, you guys are like the talent.
Well, Scott's the real talent. I'm the beginner here.
Scott is our YouTube hero, and the only person, as far as I know, who has met Steve Jobs in person. And you can see that by going to his website, and you can see I think it's with you standing next to Steve Jobs. Now, did you use Photoshop for that, or did you use Pixelmator?
That is actually
Because I know that you probably
to
couldn't get past the security perimeter.
You couldn't give us the what? I'm sorry.
Security perimeter.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you
exactly.
actually you guys used to work used to do speeches at the
Apple Store and at the Macworld conventions and all that. So.
Wow.
Yeah, but wait, what were you going to say, Aaron? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. I was just spraying my mouth with all natural breath spray, but I don't know if you could hear that.
Is that our podcast sponsor?
Did Steve Jobs ever watch you on stage? Or
Oh yeah.
wow,
So that's
many
that's
times.
where he learned his some of his technique and shtick.
My shtick.
Did you do the one more thing? Was that yours?
Woman. You got that from me? No. Yeah, one of the really, really cool things about Steve is that he was always there. I mean, he's a CEO. Talk about a hands-on CEO. He was always there. He was always watching us speak at the stores, at the Macworld conventions. I mean, he wasn't there for every single speech.
He was
but
at
he
every
would be
store.
there and not every single store. But like at the Macworld conventions, he would definitely be there on day number 1. Those were 5-day conventions or however long they were. And, he would definitely be there on day 1 and sit through each speech at least once right there in the front row to make sure that we were doing a great job. And it was just amazing because he was always there. One time I was at the Apple retail store, and he was standing right in front of me, like nose to nose. When they used to have the theaters in the retail stores? They took them out now.
Did you tell him to get out? Did you tell him excuse me, you're blocking my view?
Yeah, exactly. I was walking, I was pacing back and forth in the theater, talking about OS 10 or whatever I was talking about, and I'd stop in certain places and I'd look at the audience, and then right there, Steve Jobs, right in front of me, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. I'm like, oh my god, it's Steve. He was literally 3 inches from my nose, and
But they'd let you do another talk after that?
Amazingly, they did. Can you believe it?
that's incredible.
That's quite a story. Yeah.
I have a lot of stories about him, but we'll talk more later about
All right.
that.
Well, tune in to future podcasts and you can hear more.
Yes.
All right. So,
Well, thanks for
do
listening,
we have
everybody.
any other closing logistics? We're going to thank our audience.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening.
We love you.
And we'll see you
Soon.
Okay, I think that's it. Let's wrap it here, and
soon.
we'll talk with you all soon.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Take care.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.